Welcome to the Healthcare Technology Report, a leading information source on healthcare technology companies and solutions. Today, we speak with David Esposito, President and CEO of ONL Therapeutics, a clinical stage biopharmaceutical company developing treatments to protect and preserve sight for patients with retinal diseases. ONL's lead candidate, ONL 1204, is being advanced for conditions such as retinal detachment, geographic atrophy, and glaucoma, with the goal of preventing vision loss at its root cause. David has built and scaled multiple healthcare companies through successful exits and brings deep experience leading organizations at the intersection of science and business. I'm your host, RJ Lumba. We hope you enjoy the show. If you like the episode, click to follow. David, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today. It's a delight to be with you.
RJ, wonderful. Thanks for the invite. Look forward to the discussion.
We have a lot to talk about. I mean, you've got an amazing background. You've helped lead multiple companies, successful companies. Your background is also fascinating, having been in the military and having been a graduate of West Point. But maybe just to bring people to present day, tell us about where you sit now and what your company is focused on.
Thanks. I'm glad to go any which way across those experiences. But I think where I am today is I'm the CEO of ONL Therapeutics. ONL is based in Ann Arbor, Michigan. So our technology came out of the University of Michigan, somewhat of a classic university spin out. Our founders are retina specialists at the University of Michigan. David Zaks discovered the relevance of this receptor on the eye, on the retina specifically, that when you block that receptor, you protect retinal cells against things like glaucoma, age-related macular degeneration. So company's almost 15 years old. I've been the CEO for a bit over 6, and we're in our 5th clinical trial now for the company. And we've made really good progress in making a difference in eye disease.
And in terms of your pipeline, you have, multiple solutions or drugs that you're testing out. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So I think what's been unique about our technology, so at the end of the day, we have called a small peptide that blocks this receptor on the eye called the FAST receptor. And across a number of common diseases of the eye, things like glaucoma, an acute condition of retinal detachment, that receptor in those stresses or diseases gets activated and triggers the death of those retinal cells. Unlike skin cells, say when a retinal cell die, you don't regenerate any of those, so you don't make any more of them. So there's a limited supply. So we've developed a drug that actually protects those retinal cells regardless of the disease. And so over time, what we've done from what David's research showed on a number of animal models, we've translated that science into humans in studies of retinal detachment, glaucoma, and age-related macular degeneration in dry form. So we've methodically gone through 3 different phase 1 trials. Those are first-in-human trials for those conditions. We now are embarking on our 2nd phase 2 study, which is really where you get a chance to prove the safety and efficacy of the product. And we're excited about this upcoming trial to start.
And I think folks are generally familiar with glaucoma. Tell us about maybe the prevalence of retinal detachment. How often do you see it in folks?
Sure. We have an orphan designation in the U.S. for retinal detachment. Typically, if you talk to most people of retinal detachment, you kind of remember maybe a boxer might have gotten one of those over time. So this is not the trauma-induced retinal detachment. Typically, it's a disease of the aging. There's several 100,000 of them every year in the U.S. Across the world, the numbers get large when you add that up. But typically, the vitreous, which holds your eye in form as you age, gets much more watery, and as slowly the retina on the back of your eye loses grip, and almost like wallpaper kind of peeling off a wall. That's in essence what a retinal detachment is. And today's treatment is you go see a retina specialist and you get a laser procedure to, in essence, tack up the retina on the back of your eye. Our drug in that condition protects those retinal cells when the retina is detached until you have that surgery, which reattaches the retina to the eye lining to provide its nutrient source. So the hope would be, in what we saw in our trials, that by protecting those retinal cells, your eventual vision is not as severe without just having surgery alone. So the drug on top of standard of care surgery seems to improve people's ability to see post a retinal detachment.
I see. And then how far away are we from having your technology out in the market being used?
Well, it's a long journey on these drug discoveries. So, in the best case scenarios, we have an upcoming phase 2 study that's probably a couple years long. If that goes well, then we'd run a phase 3 study after that, which is really the registrational study for approval. So, best case scenario, we're probably about 6 years from potentially having the drug in market. Quite a bit of studies have to go on through that, but that's the typical journey for a therapeutic. You're probably in the range of 10 total years, somewhat in the clinic, and we've been through about 5 of those.
And you have a good amount of funding backing you with notable investors. Can you tell us a little bit about your investor base and what they've been able to kind of bring to the table aside from simple financial capital?
Sure. No, we need capital to run these companies and run the trials. And so we've over time, and most recently, we closed a Series D round of financing in the fall of last year. Johnson & Johnson led that round. It was a $65 million round. And we've had across our cap table, so with Johnson & Johnson a part of it, Novartis has been on our cap table, and then Bios Partners, a venture capital firm out of Fort Worth, led our B and C round, and they've participated and been board members throughout our journey. So they've been very supportive, not only just the financial piece, but across the board in supporting our journey. I will say we have the 3 leading ophthalmology-focused venture capital firms on our table. So Excite Ventures, InFocus Capital Partners, and Visionary Ventures. So what you described with regards to expertise beyond capital, those 3 firms have provided tremendous support for us over the years and expertise in ophthalmology and a number of key opinion leaders to help us with that. So we kind of think we always need capital, but it's really nice when it can come with that kind of talent and expertise to help guide our development.
Mm-hmm. We'd love to hear a little bit more about your background and how some of the prior companies you've led, and then how you found your way to ONL.
Sure. So you mentioned, post active duty in the military, I started off as a sales rep for Merck, so a large pharma company. And one of my first products was a product called Timolol, which is an eye drop to lower intraocular pressure for patients with glaucoma. So it gave me an initial appreciation of the importance of eye health and some of the damaging effects that these eye diseases have. I spent about 15 years at Merck, mostly sales, marketing, commercial strategy roles, and then moved into more of the early stage, mid-stage world of life science, both diagnostic and therapeutic. Through that journey, I've had a few what would maybe described as successful exits, build a company, launch product, sell it to a larger entity. I've also taken a few companies over the cliff in bankruptcy. You can't get into this early stage without skinning your knees a few times. So those experiences helped me learn and grow quite a bit on building early stage innovation. But more recently, I led a cancer diagnostics company called Armine Bioscience, who's focused on developing blood-based tests for, I'll assume, RJ, maybe whatever age you are, but my age, sometimes men like us may have an elevated PSA. We think about prostate cancer. You typically go to a urologist for that treatment. We had a blood test to help better discriminate beyond an elevated PSA, whether somebody like you or I may be at risk for prostate cancer. That company, we launched that product and ultimately sold it to Exact Sciences in Madison, Wisconsin. They have Cologuard. People may see those ads on TV. Mm-hmm. Investors in that company, Armine Bioscience, had also invested in ONL Therapeutics. And so after I exited that company, as ONL was looking for a leadership change, I got to know David Zaks, our founder, the science and the team. And 6 years ago is when I became the CEO. So it was kind of the common investors that helped bring me to ONL.
I can't help but think, the path you took from initially being a sales rep at Merck all the way to becoming a CEO, multiple time over CEO, that your experience, maybe learning some leadership skills at West Point and in the military, helped prepare you for this path to eventually lead organizations. Do you think there's an element of truth to that?
I think so. There's a lot of bright people who wrote a lot of books on kind of parallels on those things. I would say definitely for me, West Point's a journey about, building leadership capabilities. So that's been really supportive for me in that journey. And I think some of those foundational leadership experiences, Merck also as a large pharma, a great company to be able to build leadership accentuated that. And I think the parallels I would kind of outline somewhat that I was an infantryman, so follow me, do as I do. That set the example is a common leadership trait that I think I've tried to embody over the years. The other piece that's, I think, really critical for the early stage that my military experience certainly brought into is you've got to be prepared to adapt your plan to the situation in front of you. There's always a base case, a base plan, a base operating plan in my world today, but data may drive you in a direction that says the base case is no longer manageable and adjust the plan. I think those were military experiences I learned too. You've built a plan, but boy, as soon as you get into the mix of it, sometimes you have to adjust the plan. So I think that flexibility and leadership are, I'd say, common traits in my experience that helped me today that I learned as a young lieutenant in the infantry.
Can you tell us a little bit about the organization of ONL today? Like roughly how big is the company and how does it compare to other companies you've led?
Sure. ONL, we have 16 full-time employees. We work a lot with contract research groups as CROs that may run our clinical trials across the world. So in the early stage biotech world, you try to keep full-time folks minimal as possible and work through consultants and contract groups because sometimes you never know how the data may take you at some point on building a company. So we're pretty measured on adding full-time folks. I think other companies that I've led that have been more commercial oriented and driving sales growth, certainly those numbers get into the several hundreds of people that way to be able to do that. We're still at the stage where small focused research work and development work can get the job done. But I think as soon as you hit commercial, even though there's a lot going on in the computer and online, you still need some feet on the ground knocking on doors to drive most of the business. And that's where typically the headcounts get bigger.
Mm-hmm. We were talking before I hit record here how at the Healthcare Technology Report, we'll cover all different types of health tech from medical devices to digital health, healthcare software, biotech, biopharma. What can you tell us that's, maybe different, unique about leading a biopharma company versus maybe another type of company, and maybe what's the same? So compare and contrast.
I've had both diagnostic and med tech experience in addition to therapeutics. I think one of the striking differences is just the journey to commercialization is a lot longer in therapeutics. As we mentioned earlier, we're probably in that 8 to 10 year journey before you really think about revenue generation. So that's a mindset shift that's very, I grew up as a commercial person knocking on doc stores to sell products. So that kind of gear to get into long-term development is very different in therapeutics, where in diagnostics and med device, it's not uncommon to raise just a few $1,000,000 and in 18 months you can be in the market and actually commercializing things. So that timeline difference is very different. I would say although the principles of leadership are, the same across both wars, it's much different when you do have to drive a sales line or you're raising capital to drive growth. It's a very different mindset on how you think about executing the business than perhaps the methodical day in, day out of executing a clinical trial or moving a backup compound through research. It really is a different gear. And so I think those are probably the big striking differences of you're on the hook to drive a revenue line and you're working to focus on doing that. On the flip side, it's still stressful in the early stage because you're burning capital, so you got to raise more to move the development forward. There's no easy way on any of this stuff, RJ.
Uh-huh. And kind of where do you foresee the company being? I mean, I think it's still, as you mentioned, several years away, but is there a broad vision for this company as it's reaching its kind of stride?
The broad vision, so, from a real practical standpoint, we have a vision to help patients see the future. And so we build the base case to do exactly as we described, methodically move our lead compound through various clinical programs to then seek regulatory approval to commercialize. I mean, we are building to try to do that. I think as the CEO and certainly my board and investors, we have to keep our options open as to, is that the appropriate most capital efficient path to move all the way to commercialization, maybe an IPO in the future to be able to do that? Or is the marketplace really looking for these solutions? And so say, post a phase 2 positive result, many times you see companies like ours where a bigger player says, boy, that was good results after phase 2. Maybe we want to do a deal or acquire something at that point to then orchestrate a phase 3 study. I think we at ONL keep our options open on all those fronts. At the end of the day, we've got to put points on the board of good data. And then that creates some of those opportunities down the road. I think for us, we think this technology can really make a difference in patients with eye disease. And so our real focus is just whatever is the right vehicle to do that. We want to move it as fast as we can through clinical programs.
Excellent. We're approaching the end of the conversation. I have 2 final questions. These veer more towards the personal, but one is, can you tell us about a person who has had a profound influence on you?
All right, RJ, I tell you what, that's a good one. For an afternoon, I should have been drinking more coffee. You know what? I'm going to say my mother, RJ. I tell you what, my mom immigrated here from Glasgow, Scotland. She taught me about how to really just continue to roll with the punches, ups and downs in life. And I carry those lessons to me today in the biotech world. There's not a day that doesn't go by that you got to show up and solve a problem. Sometimes you get messy. And my mom used to say as a little kid, David, just keep your chin up and it'll be okay. She's still alive now into her 80s, and that keep your chin up, everything will be okay has been a good lesson that I've carried with me for a while. And my mom has had a great impact on that.
Last question. Can you tell us about a charity, cause, or other endeavor that you're passionate about?
I'll get a little personal on that one. So we started a foundation, Harvest Time Partners Foundation, my wife and I, about 15 years or so ago. It's dedicated to providing character building experiences to youth and young adults. And so we put a lot of time and effort in that foundation to support a lot of things around mental health for teenagers. Kids are journeying through a lot nowadays, and we support a number of organizations in support of that and hope to continue to do that work.
Excellent. Well, David, I want to thank you again for taking the time. It's been a wonderful conversation.
Hey, thank you, RJ. I appreciate it.